Hello there, subscribers and non-subscribers. This is Psychonara of Psychonara Productions, finally back after all this time. I hope you all are having a very pleasant summer so far. I know I should be apologizing for having such a prolonged period of radio silence over the last month, but unfortunately a lot of things really ended up taking my attention away from the channel. But I'm back now, and I'm ready to get to work on some more content for you all. And for this video, I wanted to do a simple follow-up to a previous video I did a few months ago discussing Splatoon 2's Octo expansion. What I wanted to talk about in particular was something that crossed my mind following the official release of the Octo expansion about a week ago. At first I wasn't really too sure of my feelings because it seems like since the expansion came out there have been a lot of people really praising it, and there are of course a lot of things about the expansion to praise with respect to what it contributes to the overall package of Splatoon 2. While there were things I did not like and still don't like about the DLC, there are also many things I enjoyed, and I think as an add-on it's well worth the $20 for all the extra single-player content it offers. But if I was just here to talk about how good the Octo expansion is, I don't think I would be acting true to myself, or acting true to my growing reputation as something of a contrarian. Since the expansion's release, I managed to beat the whole thing in about a day, and I've had about a week or so to think about its qualities and argue with myself as a fan of Splatoon about what I feel worked and what I think didn't work. At the same time, I've also been going back to the original hero mode, which is the default single player in Splatoon 2, because I never got around to 1000% completing it, or trying to beat all my old terrible records. And I have to say that between Octo expansion and hero mode, I think I might like the hero mode better, and I'd like to give some of my brief thoughts on why I feel, as the Splatoon franchise moves forward, that hero mode might still be the better blueprint for its single player. Now, before anyone watching this starts smashing their keys, posting comments about how I'm wrong, just listen for a second. I'm not saying there are not plenty of ways in which the Octo expansion does manage to improve upon things found in the hero mode. I think to the expansion's credit, it has a much greater sense of variety, and the individual levels do have more challenge to them, depending on the objective or depending on the weapons provided. Not to mention too that the off-the-hook girls got some pretty decent character development in the expansion's story, which they probably should have gotten much sooner. Though I do feel like some of their role in the expansion was a tad forced, and while I still can't say that I like them as much as the Squid Sisters, it was still nice that Pearl and Marina stopped feeling as much like filler characters, even if really Marina still remains, in my opinion, the infinitely more interesting member of the duo. But the problem with Octo expansion, I think, is that unlike the normal hero mode in Splatoon 2, it lacks what I feel is a more real sense of player game progression, and a more multi-layered sense of achievement. And not only that, but for a lot of the things it does well, or which it does better than the hero mode, there's a lot of things it throws out which really made hero mode enjoyable in its own right, I think. For starters, we have to remember that hero mode was made as pretty much a glorified tutorial for new players, and it has no pretensions to being too much else. It was meant to be something the average player could beat in like 2 or 3 hours so that they could quickly get the training they needed for the multiplayer. At the same time, hero mode also added these exploration and collectathon elements with stuff like the Sunken Scrolls, which helped to flesh out the lore of the Splatoon world, as well as with stuff like the Sardinium, which was used for upgrading weapons, providing the mode with some very light customization. On top of all that, there was also a certain measure of replayability even for skilled players in how completion records were kept for all the hero mode's levels. And of course, beating every level with each of the different hero weapons would unlock those same weapons for use in the multiplayer as well. Most importantly though, if you really wanted to see the story of the hero mode, there were no shortcuts to the end. You could choose which levels in an individual sector you wanted to complete first, but you had to find all the invisible kettles in a sector to play the stages, you then had to beat all the stages to get to the sector's presiding boss, you then had to beat that boss to go to the next sector of levels, which were, as a general rule, slightly more challenging than the last, and you ultimately had to beat every level and every previous boss to get to the final boss and see the ending. There were no workarounds in the hero mode where you could just bypass any level that gave you the slightest bit of trouble, or any level which you were too lazy or too bored to complete. And because the purpose of hero mode was to educate and train players, with individual levels being designed to test the skills the player was supposed to learn, there was a real sense that the story's progression was intimately tied to either the player becoming better or proving they were worthy. And that same feeling is not really in Octo expansion. For one thing, any level that gives a player any trouble for being too too difficult can pretty much be skipped as long as they've grinded for enough of those CQ points on previous levels so that they can pay Pearl and Marina to hack the stage for them. And sure, if you skip levels you don't get those colored mem cakes with the flavor text poems, but even if you skip all but one of the levels in a complete rail line of challenges, you can still get all of the exclusive multiplayer gear the expansion provides, as if you did complete them yourself. Plus, a lot of the flavor text on some of those mem cakes doesn't really develop the world of Splatoon as much as many of the Sunken Scrolls do in my opinion. There's some good ones, but there's also some pointless ones too, and I don't think by themselves that they're the best motivation for completion. When coupled with the fact that you can also skip all the final phases of the expansion's campaign to just see the ending, so long as you die enough times to charge the skip meter, Octo expansion really takes away a lot of its own sense of challenge and the sense that there's any urgency for the player to get good, because in the end, the player will be able to see the same ending regardless. All that matters is that they have enough in-game cash or aren't too proud to take an express train to victory. If the hero mode is a test where players can only graduate if they pass the test, Octo expansion is a test where players who take it and players who skip it can all still pass the class. And regardless of the quality of the expansion's presentation, I think that is still a very serious design issue. I don't know if this is the best comparison, but imagine you were playing a Zelda game, and this Zelda game had the best dungeons you've played in a Zelda game so far. But then imagine that outside each dungeon, there was a goblin and a forest dryad whom, if you gave enough rupees from just replaying the same 2 dungeons over and over again, you could skip every other dungeon and go right to the fight to save Princess Zelda. And then imagine if you could skip to the ending if you just let Ganon kill you enough times. Well, that's kind of what Octo expansion feels like it does. It's like it doesn't know if it wants to be something even a casual player can just coast through, or if it wants to be more of a grueling labyrinth of various dungeons the player has to beat to see the ending, or that they have to beat to get the most coveted rewards the DLC offers. I mean, they try to handicap you by making it so you have to pay to enter challenges and then mixing up the costs of continuing or skipping based on the particular stage, but really I think for most moderately skilled players, you're never going to have to worry about that. I know once I pretty much completed my 3rd rail line of challenges, I had already earned or been handed so much CQ it never felt like I could run out, and it was really just the whole Mario Odyssey situation again, where if you just pick up enough coins, which are so liberally given to you, you can basically have unlimited lives. Except at least in Mario Odyssey, you couldn't just pay coins to get all the power moons automatically and then skip to the ending. There was still a bunch of work you had to put in to find the moons. Now, there are some rewards you do get by actually completing all the levels. Like, if you get all the colored mem cakes, not only do you get all their flavor text, but you also unlock a secret boss fight, which, unlike all the other boss fights, it is the only boss you can't just skip for some reason. And this boss is really tough. But unfortunately, not only is it just another version of a boss you already fought, but after spending hours completing all 80 levels and then fighting this boss, the only thing the game gives you as a reward is a golden toothpick. Just one piece of okay gear. While it does come with bragging rights, it doesn't feel very proportionate to the work you put in, especially when mostly everything else worth seeing or worth getting in the expansion, including the ending, the playable Octoling, and all the other gear, can be obtained by just taking the easiest, least effort route possible. I doubt most lazy players, or that most players who are more concerned with their multiplayer ranks, see the loss of the bragging rights given by the golden toothpick as that big of a deal that they'll really want to go out of their way to get it once they realize it's the only reward for taking the harder road. Sure, plenty of games do offer a choice between easy and hard modes, where players play the same levels and get the same rewards regardless of the difficulty they choose. But Octo Expansion's approach of paying CQ points to skip any level you want, or to continue mid-level and never being forced to start over if you lose all your lives, feels less like a traditional choice between easy and hard difficulties, and more like a choice between walking several miles in the heat to get some milk from the grocery store, or just paying a couple extra bucks to take an air-conditioned bus ride there, begging the question, why walk? And while I mentioned the Octo Expansion's level variety as an asset earlier, there is a feeling that a lot of these 80 levels include a good amount of padding, as certain types of stages just repeat themselves too often, with the challenge eventually starting to feel more like things are simply getting more tedious as you play the up-teenth Guide the 8-Ball level. What's more is that some levels stop feeling like actual single-player stages after a while, and they start to feel more like mini-games. Now, there's nothing wrong with the more mini-game style stuff itself. I do think the hero mode could have benefited a lot from having a few more side missions or side games like these, but I think when people think of what makes Octo expansion good, they're usually thinking more of the longer stages, where you're traversing obstacles and splatting enemies to get from point A to point B. Basically, the levels that follow a lot of the same principles as the stages which are already found in the hero mode, but now with a few new twists. I think if given the choice between playing more stuff like 8-ball bingo and match the shape and get all the crates in one shot, or playing some more of the best hero mode levels like Octo Zeppelin Invasion, Towering Heights, or Platform Madhouse, most players would prefer more of the latter. I think what I might like a bit better about Splatoon 2's hero mode over the Octo expansion is that when I asked myself the same questions perhaps all players eventually ask, questions like why am I doing this or what is the point, I felt like I got more answers from the hero mode. With the hero mode, I knew I needed to beat all the levels if I wanted to save Cali or to save Inkopolis. I knew I needed to beat everything if I wanted the hero gear and the hero shot. I knew I needed to prove my skill in each level with each other hero weapon if I wanted to use them in the multiplayer. I also knew that I needed to explore all these levels if I wanted to find the sunken scrolls and learn more about the world of Splatoon. And I knew I needed to work at learning all the stages so that I could get better completion times if I wanted to prove my speedrunning skills to either myself or to others. With Octo expansion, while there is a lot of really good level design and a lot of attention put into its overall aesthetics and presentation, once you've seen and completed all 80 stages, there's little reason to come back to it, except to just grind for more CQ on those few stages you really like, so that you can go to that vending machine and roll a loot box for multiplayer items, which is something you can already do in the game's co-op Salmon Run mode more easily. The overall sense of accomplishment in beating everything in Octo expansion doesn't feel quite as great as it perhaps should, considering just how many repetitive challenges you have to force yourself to go through. If there is a Splatoon 3 in development, and if they are serious about building on the single player, I disagree with those who are trying to say that Octo expansion is the template to go with. While there are things from the Octo expansion I would like to see included in the next Splatoon game, I think the format of the hero mode as this light, open-world collectathon sort of adventure with fewer but longer-paced levels, with an emphasis on the players always having to prove their skill in order to move forward, provides the much better formula for a core single player. Octo expansion, while fun as a DLC, feels a bit too much like a challenge chamber, made up of mostly optional minigames and discarded concepts for hero mode levels of wildly varying difficulty. And unfortunately, these stages don't have that element of exploration or that progressive curve the real hero mode stages have. Its climactic final phases are very well done from just a design perspective, but ultimately they can just be skipped by any player who is too lazy or too incompetent to put in any work to learn the skills the previous levels may have tried to teach them. Thus, it removes an element of player growth and agency from the equation. Heck, technically, you don't even beat the final boss in Octo expansion. Pearl and Marina do it. At least in the hero mode, the Squid Sisters just root you on and let you finish off Octavio yourself, instead of undermining your agency as a player. And you know you only got to this point in the story, not because you paid enough power eggs to get there, but because you showed the game you had what it takes to be the hero. To be fair, by themselves I don't think that either hero mode or Octo expansion has what it takes to stand apart from Splatoon's multiplayer, to which they both still remain subservient. But perhaps finding the middle ground between these two single-player modes, something that has the progression, the exploration, and the multifaceted sense of reward that hero mode offers, but also has the scale and variety of the Octo expansion, could be the key to creating a more definitive single-player experience that could actually compete with Splatoon's multiplayer on its own merits. But who knows what the developers have planned for the future. I just hope to God that they don't do the level skipping crap ever again. But that's just my quick take on the whole thing. I mean, I could go into much more detail about the nuances of each single-player game, but then I'd be here for a while. Maybe I will get to doing a more in-depth analysis eventually, but I just wanted to know if there's anybody else out there who also felt that the Octo expansion was missing something, which the hero mode already had, or if anyone still kind of preferred the hero mode in some ways still, or at least, like me, see it as the better foundation to build upon. I would love to know what you guys think. As always, feel free to comment, like, or subscribe, and stay tuned in the future for more Splatoon and non-Splatoon related video game content. As always, this has been Psychonara of Psychonara Productions, signing off.